would you say was the most significant event or person that made you an advocate of Catholic social justice?
There are just so many people who are involved in that. Okay, one of the chief ones was Dorothy Day. I grew up as a right-wing Roman Catholic with all sorts of racist attitudes. Okay? And in May 1945, riding on the subway, I found the May 1945 issue of the Catholic Worker. Okay? And I was not yet 15 years old. And I'm reading the Catholic Worker. I'm on my way to school in Bishop Loughlin High School in Brooklyn. Okay? And I'm reading the Catholic Worker and I'm saying, I never learned this in Catholic school. Okay? And then shortly after that, I visited Incarnation Church in Hollis, and they had a pamphlet rack, and I picked up a pamphlet that was titled The Christian Doctrine of Property. Okay? And I read that, and I learned a lot of things I never learned in Catholic elementary school. In particular, I can still see the first page of that pamphlet. Okay? And there's a quotation from St. Augustine, and he says, the superfluities of the rich are the necessaries of the poor. Okay? I said, oh, that makes sense. You know, but I had never heard it before. Okay? So when school was finished in June of 45, I asked my father if I could go visit the Catholic Worker and see Dorothy Day. So that's what I did. I went into the Catholic Worker. My introduction to Dorothy Day was I walked up and there was a woman doing some work, and I said, I'd like to visit with Dorothy Day. I just want to visit here for a little while. She said, oh, I'm glad you're here. We need somebody inside to make sandwiches. So I went in and made sandwiches for a little while. Then I found out later that the woman who sent me there was Dorothy Day. And
oh, wow.
I would from that point on until I went into the seminary, I was visiting the seminary, visiting Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker fairly regularly. Okay? I was ordained and in the seminary, we had a group of people, a group of seminarians who met during the summertime, okay? Which we were not supposed to do. Okay? We met during the summertime, and we met, can't remember all their names, but a guy by the name of Kelly was kind of leading us and introduced us to people in the Diocese of Brooklyn, okay, who were very actively involved in social justice work. Okay? And they introduced us to a whole lot of experiences, okay, in New York. Okay? So we got to know very concrete stuff that was going on. Okay? Excuse me. So, and in the course of all those years, okay, one of the interesting things that Dorothy Day did with me, I think it was in 1946 or 47, I was working there in the summertime, I was just visiting there in the summertime, and she suggested to me that I work with the Baroness de York, who was running Friendship House in Harlem at that time. Okay? So I said, okay, so I went up, and I began to meet black people like individual people, like normal human beings, which I did not consider them to be. Okay? And because of the way I was brought up. Okay? My father hated black people, hated Jews, and hated Italians. Okay? And that's what I grew up with. Okay? So I was bit by bit wearing all of that down by all these experiences that I had through Dorothy Day and other people that I got to know. Okay? So anyway, before I even got into the seminary, I went into the seminary when I was 20 years old. So by this time I had known Dorothy Day for 16 years, okay? And not 16 years. 6 years.
Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah. 15 to 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
And had all sorts of other experiences that just blew my mind. and totally changed my outlook on human beings and on life. I was ordained in June of 1956. Okay? I don't remember whether it was July or August. I got a call from Dorothy Day, okay? And she asked me to go and bless their new farm on Staten Island. Okay? And I said, this is fantastic. This is wonderful. Okay? So I called two friends of mine, Brian Carvelis and Matt Foley, and the three of us went in to bless this farm. It's a whole different experience about liturgy than I ever had in the seminary. Everything was rigid and ordered and well ordered. In the seminary, everything was free and open, blessing the thing. There were as many animals in the procession as well as human beings. Okay? A lot of music that I could recognize, but not church music. Okay? It's just a whole different experience of human life. Okay? There was a bunch of girls who approached me one day, and they said, "We want to be altar boys." I said, "You can't be." And they said, "Why not?" "Because you're girls." At any rate, we had a conversation, and I approached the guy who was administrator of the parish at that time, Jack Hall.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
And I asked him about it. He said, okay.
Okay.
He's the one responsible for the first time that we had altar girls here is Jack Hall, not Andy Connolly.
Well,
That's all.
Also, I served on the school board.
yeah, oh, okay.
I was elected to
Yeah.
the school board. Okay. And it was Amy James. Amy James approached me, okay, and wanted to know if I would run for the school board. My response to her and to all her friends was, I'm willing to run. I am not willing to run for the school board, but I'm willing to run for the school board. What I meant was that I would not run a campaign, okay, which would involve public speeches and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I said, if you want to run me, I accept that. So I did. I ran and I won handily. Okay, but it was a waste of time because I had zero impact on the board because I was a lone voice, and it was just another waste of time. Okay, it was fun a little bit, but not worth the effort.
Andy, you said it was major, and it was major when you had the coalition with the Lutheran Church. How did
Right.
that start, and when did that start?
You'll have to ask somebody else. I think the inspiration for that began with Pastor Bagnall, Ron Bagnall. And he raised the issue, okay, about meeting together and so forth. Okay? And it began with exchanging preachers, okay? But it began to get deeper and deeper. We ran an adult education program, okay? The two churches together. And if I remember correctly, then the inspiration, the very concrete inspiration for continuing meetings came at we did a joint course on the sacraments, and it was on the sacrament of reconciliation, okay, that this raised the whole issue of joining together, okay, to come to understand, to work together on different issues, and also to come together to a better understanding of who we were, and who Lutherans were, and who Roman Catholics were, and what was that could bind them together. Okay? And then out of that experience grew a committee that began to work on a joint statement of our common faith. Okay? And that just prompted a whole bunch of other relationships. Okay? I remember one particular night, one particular day when I was scheduled to preach at the Lutheran Church, and Ron was scheduled to preach here, okay? And we had a terrible storm the night before, and he got stuck in floods on Staten Island and couldn't come to the church to celebrate. So I was alone okay, in the Lutheran Church. Okay. So what do? Okay. I was there to preach. So what I did was celebrate Mass. Okay. So there was a standing joke among us. And that was the day the Lutherans made their first communion. One of the things that came out of all of that was the soup kitchen.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask about
The
that.
soup
They're
kitchen
all
was
in
a
that.
joint effort of Miraculous Medal Church and Trinity Lutheran Church. Okay? And we invited the Mercy Sisters to come and work on that, and then it became a Mercy Sisters program. Okay?
Yeah.
But it was more sponsored by the Trinity Lutheran Church than by Miraculous Medal. Okay? So, but there was a lot of stuff going on. But the meetings, the joint meetings and so forth. I remember one of the interesting experiences here in Miraculous Medal, okay, when in the exchange of pulpits, he had an assistant minister. I can't remember her last name. Her first name was Barbara, okay? And she came here to preach. Okay? And I remember the reaction of the people here as this female walking down the aisle with a Roman collar on, like, what the hell are they up to now? But nobody objected, especially after she preached, because she was so excellent. She was just so marvelous. Okay?
Yeah.
That nobody had an argument with whether she should preach or not. But that was a very good, a super positive experience. And
Can you speak to a time in your life when you had to do something that you found extremely difficult, but in order to be obedient to God, you had to do it? When something is said, oh God, I really, really don't want to do this, but
it's my
you
duty.
knew that is what He wanted you to do.
probably one of the most difficult things I ever had to do was alcohol rehab. I was down in the Dominican Republic, and I was confronted by our staff, by my friends, about my alcohol use. And after one failed effort, I ended up responding to them very positively, okay? Reluctantly, but positively. And that also changed my life radically changed my life when I went to alcohol rehab. Okay? That I knew, and I knew even more after finishing rehab, how much that was what God wanted me to do. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And my whole experience with alcohol and alcohol rehab has been of profound and multiple benefits to many other people. Like in confession, I have been able to help alcoholics to get straightened out. And it's just been a very freeing experience for me. Okay? And I am now 29 years sober.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's,
Great answer.
yeah. There are probably other things, but that one stands out for me.
In 1983, you went to Bishop McCann.
Okay, well, let me, it goes back actually, this story goes back to the 1950s. And
Good. Okay.
before I was ordained in the seminary, for 2 years, I was head of a group called the Mission Club. And I learned about the church in Latin America. And I learned how much the church was united with the rich in Latin America and how the church was corrupted. And particularly, I learned about Mary Noel, who was leading the church in Latin America in a different direction. I toyed with the idea of joining Mary Noel when I was in the seminary. But I meanwhile had done a census among the Puerto Ricans who were moving into the city at that time. So I decided not to go with Maryknoll, but to work with the Puerto Ricans in Brooklyn. Okay? However, when I was ordained, my two friends got the assignment to work with the Puerto Ricans in Brooklyn, okay? And I got assigned to the richest parish in the community, the richest community in the whole country. Okay? So the idea of Latin America was on my mind. Okay? In 1957, the diocese was split and became the Diocese of Rockville Center. In 1958, I approached Bishop Kellenberg and asked him if I could go to Latin America with Maryknoll, and he looked at me and said, "Not now or ever."
I take that as
So
a
the
no.
idea of Latin America was on my mind from the very beginning, from many, many years, even before I was ordained. Okay? And Bill arrived here, and Bill already had contact with Latin America, so my interest in Latin America was there, and he strengthened the idea of going to Latin America. Okay? So anyway, 1983, okay, I was here for a long time. I was here for 15 years. And I said to myself, if I'm going to go to Latin America, it has to be now or never. So I decided that I would leave here, take a sabbatical, okay, and go down to Dominican Republic, I was hoping to go to El Salvador, actually, okay? But Tom Maloney, who was the priest in Dominican Republic, where the diocese had a mission, and the mission was going to be closed because the bishop didn't want one guy working alone in the Dominican Republic, which is silly, but that's the way it was, okay? So Tom called me, he heard that I was interested in Latin America. He called me, we talked, I took a month in Dominican Republic, and I said, well, it's not exactly what I'm looking for, okay, but I feel a responsibility to the diocese and to the people there, okay? So I said, let's go with that, okay? So I went down to Dominican Republic
I want to interrupt you for half a second. I thought that a part of that assignment to Wyandanch was also a punishment because you had gotten in trouble because
No.
you had called Martin Luther King a saint, and there
No.
were these people that were
No,
complaining about you?
no,
Okay,
quite the contrary.
okay.
Quite the contrary. I never received any criticism from the bishop or anybody in the bishop's office about what I did in Holy Family Parish,
Okay,
about the homily about Martin Luther King. Never received any criticism whatsoever.
okay, okay. I thought it was
They
out
may
of
have done
that
it a bit
you told
among
me
themselves.
that they wanted.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
but officially I was never ever criticized by them, by Kellenberg, by Bishop Kellenberg,
Uh-huh.
or by anybody else in his office. Okay? Okay? I was questioned, as I mentioned before, by Bishop Baldwin, you know, why did you do that thing? Okay?
Uh-huh.
But that's the extent of it. Okay?
There was the Catholic Interracial Council.
There was a
Existed
Catholic
in the
Interracial
diocese
Council.
years before that.
Yeah.
And continued existing at that time. Now, were you ever affiliated with that?
I was, matter of fact, I was mentioning before my involvement with the Urban Renewal Program. And one night at St. Agnes in Rockville Center in January of 1963, okay, there was a birthday celebration for the rector of the cathedral, Frank Williams. Okay? And there were about 8 priests in the house at that time. Okay? And I was the last one out of confessions. Okay? And I walk into the room, and the only chair available at the table, okay, well, that wasn't a table, it was in Frank Williams' room. The only chair available was directly opposite Bishop Kellenberg. Okay? So I sat down and I just about put my butt in the chair. Okay? And Kellenberg looks at me and says, I want you to get out of Urban Renewal.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to him was, no.
That's pretty
That
clear.
was the only response that could come to my head, no. And he went at me, and he told me that I was involved only because of politics, and that the Catholic Christian family movement was involved only because of politics, okay? And we argued back and forth, okay? And just a little side story, Monsignor Frank Concannon had just come out of the hospital that day after a severe heart attack, okay? And I didn't see this happening, but he was way over here, and Bishop Kellenberg is here, and I'm here, and he's sitting on the edge of his chair, and the other guys are telling me he's getting redder and redder and redder, okay, because he's so angry at Kellenberg, okay, and he's going there, "You son of a bitch, leave him alone, you bastard, leave him alone, don't."
Yeah.
But that's the way it was, okay? And when we finally got up from the chair to go down for supper, Kellenberg says to me, "I want you to be the assistant chaplain to the Catholic Interracial Council. You figure it out."
That's the point I wanted to make sure you got in here.
But the Catholic Interracial Council was not very effective agency, okay? A lot of talk, but it didn't do very much, okay? Good people, but it just didn't do very, very much, okay? The urban renewal eventually went through, but that was after I left. I left St. Agnes in 1963, in June of 1963, went down to Catholic University and then Holy Trinity High School, okay? I came here at the end of June of 1968, okay? There had been riots in Wyandanch, there had been a couple of fires, there had been a big fight in the fire department over a black guy, I think his name was Cobb, I don't remember exactly if that's true or not. Okay, but there was a black guy who wanted to volunteer for the fire department, and the fire department was not too anxious to have him up here, have him join the fire department in Wyandanch. He eventually did. He was they were required to accept him. Okay? But that's the Wyandanch that I entered, okay? Without having the slightest idea about what I was going to do, what the community was like, or anything else. Okay? Okay, there was no real relationship between the parish, between the church, and the community. Nothing was going on. Okay? I began to walk every morning down to the candy store down by the Long Island Railroad station. I would walk down there because that's where people met. Okay? I walked down to get my newspaper, okay, and would walk back. One of the interesting events in those walks, I was right here on this corner, okay? And I'm walking across the street, and a car coming south on straight path makes a left turn and goes right at me. Okay, I had to leap onto the dirt that was there, no sidewalk or anything. Okay, and I look back, and here are 4 or 5 young black men, okay, laughing like crazy at me. Okay. So they were very obviously making an attack against me. Okay. That didn't
And you had the
encourage me
collar
very
on.
much.
You had the collar on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. At any rate, I discovered that there was a local branch of the Equal Opportunity Program of the federal government. Okay. It was called the EOC Center, okay, down on Long Island Avenue. Bob Washington was the head of that program. I went to meetings there and slowly got to know the people involved. And Bob Washington and I very slowly became very good friends. Okay? And that was a major help to me. Okay? Then through him, I think it was, I learned about the Mothers Club. Okay? And the Mothers Club was working on developing a daycare center. Okay? So I found out when their meetings were. I got to the meeting, and that was my first meeting with Amy James. Okay? Amy James was a major influence on my life. Okay? Amy James, a lot of the black men would call Amy James mom or mother. Okay? That was the kind of a relationship she had with the black community. She was a really solid lady. Okay? But I became a member of the Mothers Club. I lacked some of the qualifications, of course. But it was called Mothers Club because they were looking to take care of the mothers who had kids and couldn't go to work or couldn't go to school or anything like that.
And maybe didn't have spouses.
Some of them did, some, not all of them did. Okay? But I met a lot of very, very good people, okay, who were part of the Mothers Club. Okay? And actually, this committee called the Mothers Club became a really close-knit community by itself. And one of the questions that came up, each one had to explain why you got involved in the Mothers Club. So when it came to me to explain why I got involved in the Mothers Club, one of my first responses was my belief in God, what I understood about who God was and what God wanted from me. Okay? And I have to say that they were kind of spellbound by the fact that I would even say that. Okay? But that had an impact on everybody at that time. Okay? But we became a very good board, and I ended up being the driver for everybody. We went to meetings all over the place. Okay? And Rockefeller, the governor, had just developed a new program for daycare centers, and we were the first ones to come in under that program. Okay? I forget what year it was. It had to be somewhere around 1972, 73 or something like that. I don't remember. Okay? But we ended up building a good daycare center that took care of, I think it was 125 kids every day and 75 kids after school. Okay? So it enabled mothers to go get jobs and enabled mothers to go back to school again. Okay? It has closed down. I do not know anything at all about it, about why it closed down.
I find it curious that it was called the Mothers Club, because I'm involved with the Mothers Club of Wheatley Heights, and I thought that was the very first time there was a Mothers Club. So, I never knew that there was another Mothers Club in Wyandanch,
This would have been probably around 1969.
Yeah.
About a year or so after I moved here,
Wow.
that I found out about this Mothers Club.
Yeah, sure.
And Amy was a member of our parish. Okay?
Yeah.
And there was one time she stopped talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out what it is. So I sat her down and talked to her. And it's something that I said or something that I did, I do not remember, okay, that offended her. Okay? And she considered it as a racist act on my part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I understood things better, she understood things better, and we went back to talking and became very, very good friends. And there was another time that she stopped talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I approached her again, and she tried to explain it to me, and this time I said, "This time, Amy, you're wrong."
Mm-hmm.
She acknowledged that, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and we became good friends again. Okay? But I had a very good relationship with her. One of my favorite stories, okay, was when I was leaving Wyandanch. Okay? I left Wyandanch in June of 1984. Okay? And in the springtime, I went down to the drugstore, okay, for something. I was in a hurry. I went down, went into the store, got what I needed, came out, and there was this big semi, okay, double parked and blocking me. Okay? So I said to myself, that has to be that big guy that just went into the drugstore. So I went to the drugstore, and there were maybe 5 or 6 other people, and then there's a big black driver, and he's there. I went over, I said, "Are you the driver of the semi out there?" "Yeah." I said to myself, "Uh-oh." And I said, "Will you please move it? Because you're double parked, and I'm really in a hurry and I want to get out. I'll move it when I want to." So I said, "No." I said, "You'll move it now." And he looks at me, and he looks around at all the people. Everybody else in the store is black except me, and the clerk behind the counter. And he looks around, and he looks back at me and says, "Do you know where you are?"
Mm-hmm.
I look around at everybody. I don't know anybody in there at all. I looked at him, but I knew where the people stood in this discussion. I looked at him, I said, "Do you know where you are?" And he looked around again, went out and he moved his truck. All the people in the store were with me, even though I was whitey. And I said to myself, thank God. That, no, it really meant a great deal to me that they accepted me and they took a stand that was not a racial stand at all. It was a stand for justice. And it was a very moving experience for me.
Good. That's great.
One of the most important experiences that we had here, and Bill knows this one very well, with the library. There was no library here, okay? And there was a committee formed. By the way, one of the very important experience was with Bob Washington. And I suggested, we talked a lot about a community development program, okay? So we together decided to form the Wyandanch Community Development Corporation, okay? And that was responsible for a lot, that became responsible for a lot of stuff. We ended up with a contract to develop housing with the New York State Urban Development Corporation. Okay? And we got grants, $750,000 from New York State, okay, to develop a program for housing on Commonwealth Boulevard, Commonwealth Avenue. Okay? And very, very interesting stuff. This is not about the library, I've changed subjects. But one of the first things that I did, our very first meeting with after the contract with the New York State Urban Development Corporation, UDC, the members of the board, okay, would be paid $50 each one for every meeting that we had. Okay, that's pretty good. You know? And I suggested to the board that we refuse that $50, or we take, each one of us refuse it, and we give it to the board itself, so that the board had money to function on its own without having to do anything else. Okay? I was pleasantly surprised to get 100% cooperation on that. Okay? So that all the board members made no money on it whatsoever, okay? But gave that $50 every month that we met, okay, to the board itself, to the Wyandanch Community Development Corporation. Middle-class blacks were opposed to the library because they could get a library card for $30 a year in North Babylon. Okay? The poor community was thoroughly in favor of a library because they needed it. Okay? There was no such thing available to them. Okay? But there was a big battle. Okay? It was in all the newspapers. It was in the Long Island Press. It was in Newsday. Okay? The president of the Board of Education stood on the steps of the Martin Luther King School right across the street from the church, giving a press conference. And he said, and this is almost literally what he said, "What do we need a library for? After all, our children can't read." Okay?
Oh my God.
That was the president of the school board.
Why can't they read?
Yeah. At any rate,
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk
I
about
used to go to the meetings of the opposition to the library, and I was very publicly involved in all of this. Okay? So there was a meeting of the opposition in the Martin Luther King School, and this one night I went over there, okay, and the president of the Board of Education saw me there, and he signaled me. So we went outside, we walked down the hallway to a classroom, he closed the door, and he reaches in his pocket and he takes out a gun, points the gun at me, and says, "I know how to use this, I want you to get out of the fight for the library." So I said to him, "Okay, we're gonna have to find out if you know how to use it, because I'm not getting out of the fight for the library." Okay? And we eventually won the library, and I'm still alive to tell the story.
Amen.
Right. Yeah. That's
They also, the night of the victory, the only voting machine was over here in the school, okay? And we won handily, okay? And I'm walking out of the school, and it just happens that I walked out right behind the leaders of the opposition. And they're talking about burning down the church. Okay?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I let them know that I was behind them. I said, please do that because we have very good insurance and we can use a new building.
Wow.
Say that happened years later.
I remember that.
That almost sounds like WikiLeaks, if you're listening.
Okay. I think it's very important to recognize a couple of people who are not from Wyandanch, but who participated in a number of things in Wyandanch, okay, and were very important persons for the development of different things. And there's one guy in particular, Bill Bajesi. Bill Bajesi was a lawyer.
Oh, yeah, no, Belford.
And Bill was a friend of Amy James. Okay? And Bill worked free of charge as a lawyer for the daycare center and did a lot of other little things on the side, okay, besides that. But without his help, I don't know where the daycare center would have gone. Okay? His help was essential, okay, to the development of the daycare center because he knew all the legal stuff. Okay? And he led the scene when the time came for a contract with New York State. And we had two big meetings in the Empire State Building. Okay? Started at 8 o'clock in the morning, each one of these meetings. Started at 8 o'clock in the morning and went till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Okay? Dotting I's and crossing T's and putting in commas instead of a semicolon and all that sort of stuff, where you needed a lawyer who was thoroughly committed. And
Yeah.
Bill Bajesi was thoroughly committed to the daycare center and to Amy James and to the whole group. So his work is very important. Okay? And there was a couple, I think you know them, I'm not too sure, from Amityville. I think her first name was Juanita and her husband was Raul Davis. Okay? Juanita was on the board of the Mothers Club, which developed the daycare center. But the two of them were working very hard on a number of issues, okay, regarding Wyandanch. Okay? And Juanita was excellent, okay, and so was Raul. Raul and I were invited to give a talk to the police rookies, okay, in Riverhead. Okay? But after we finished, they decided that they didn't want us back. But those three people, Bill Bajesi, Juanita Davis, and Raul Davis, were very, very good. And one other person from Wyandanch, who was very much involved in the housing project that we had developed, and that was David Rooks. And David Rooks was the president of the committee that put together the housing program with the New York State Housing and Urban Development Corporation. Okay? And David Rooks was a Baptist minister. Okay? And there was a picture in Newsday, a picture in the Long Island Press, after the town of Babylon voted down the housing. Okay? And David Rooks just cried like a baby, okay, when that happened. Okay? And that picture of David Rooks crying was in the local, it was in Newsday in the Long Island Press. So those four people are very, very important, okay, because they had a lot to do with the development of these issues in Wyandanch. Okay?
Didn't like over 1,000 people show up at the town hearing because you wanted the housing development on Commonwealth, and all of Deer Park came out against
Oh, yeah.
it. It was terrible, yeah.
Oh yeah, Deer Park was a center of the opposition.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't want Bed-Stuy
Right.
in Wyandanch, so we had another very important element in our outreach program was Alga Santana. We got a grant from the Negro and Indian Mission in Washington, D.C., okay, to pay for a social worker. So we hired Alga Santana, and she helped put together the outreach program. Okay? And that's another thing I think we have to talk about. Okay?
Yeah.
The outreach program started in 1968. Okay? But the way it started was interesting. I arrived here in June of 1968, and in September there was a meeting of the Holy Name Society, and it was on a Monday night, okay? And I had nothing to do with the Holy Name Society. I didn't know anything about it at all. But the pastor at supper table says to me that you are in charge of the Holy Name Society. So anyway, that began an interesting conversation with the pastor at that time. Okay? And the pastor ended up saying, sitting at the supper table saying, I never had a curate like this. I never had a, what am I going to do? I never had a curate like this. But anyway, that's another story. But in December of 1968, the members of the Holy Name Society, that was the complete roster of the Holy Name Society. They rang the doorbell, and they had 4 turkeys, and they wanted to give to poor families.